I never imagined the day would come when my own son would try to take everything from me, but there I was standing in the middle of a quiet bank in Ohio, hearing Michael's voice turn cold as ice. "Please freeze her account," he told the teller. "My mother isn't in her right mind anymore." For a moment I couldn't even breathe. I looked at him, my son, the boy I raised, the man I trusted, and he wouldn't meet my eyes. But then the teller opened my file, and everything changed. Her expression shifted, and suddenly I realized this wasn't going to end the way Michael expected. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you love, I want you to stay with me on this. Like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what would you do if your own child turned against you? I used to believe that love, when given fully, always found its way back home. That belief carried me through 35 years of long shifts, aching feet, and quiet nights alone after my husband passed. It carried me through the hardest moments of my life, because at the center of it all, there was always one reason I kept going: my son. Michael Carter wasn't just my child, he was my purpose. After his father died in a car accident when Michael was only 8 years old, the world shifted in a way I never saw coming. One moment, we were a family of 3 laughing over burnt pancakes on Sunday mornings. The next, it was just me sitting on the edge of a hospital bed trying to explain loss to a boy who wasn't old enough to understand why his father wasn't coming home. I didn't have the luxury to fall apart, so I didn't. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital in Cleveland, working nights, weekends, holidays, anything they would give me. I became the nurse who never said no, the one who stayed late, the one who took on more than she should. Because every extra hour meant something for Michael. It meant new school shoes instead of hand-me-downs. It meant piano lessons when he showed interest. It meant a chance at a better life than the one I was barely holding together. There were nights I would come home so exhausted I could barely keep my eyes open, but I'd still sit at the kitchen table and help him with his homework. I remember once falling asleep mid-sentence while explaining fractions only to wake up to find Michael quietly covering me with a blanket. He whispered, "You work too hard, Mom." And I smiled even in my sleep, because it was worth it, always worth it. As Michael grew older, he became everything I had hoped for: kind, responsible, driven. He got good grades, stayed out of trouble, and never once made me regret the sacrifices I had made. When he got accepted into Ohio State, I cried in the parking lot of the hospital before my shift. Not because I was sad, but because I knew it meant everything had paid off. Of course, college wasn't cheap. I dipped into my savings without hesitation. The small account I had built over years, little by little, paycheck by paycheck, started to shrink. But I told myself it didn't matter. "This is what it's for, Natalie," I would say. "This is what you worked for." Michael never had to take out student loans, not a single one. And when he graduated, he hugged me tighter than he ever had before. "I couldn't have done this without you," he said. Those words stayed with me longer than any paycheck ever could. After college, Michael landed a steady job in marketing. It wasn't glamorous at first, but it was stable. And slowly he began building his own life. When he told me he wanted to buy a house, I didn't hesitate then either. "I'll help with the down payment," I told him. He tried to refuse, at first said he wanted to do it on his own, but I saw the numbers. I knew how hard it would be, so I insisted. In the end, I transferred a large portion of my savings to him. The house he bought wasn't extravagant, but it was his. A small 2-story home in a quiet suburb just outside Columbus. I still remember the first time I walked through it with him. He was smiling like a kid again. "This is it, Mom," he said. "This is my place." I ran my hand along the kitchen counter, imagining his future there. Holidays, family dinners, maybe grandchildren running through the halls someday. It felt like the beginning of something beautiful. And for a while, it was. Michael called me every Sunday without fail. Sometimes more than that. We'd talk about everything: his job, his plans, even the little things that didn't matter. He'd still come visit me in Cleveland when he could. I'd cook his favorite meals: fried chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, just the way he liked them. We'd sit at the table laughing like nothing had changed. Those were the moments I held on to. the moments that made me believe I had done something right. But looking back now, I realized something else. Things didn't fall apart overnight. They shifted slowly, quietly, almost too quietly to notice at first. It started with missed calls, then shorter conversations, then excuses. "I've just been busy, Mom. Work's been crazy lately. I'll call you back, okay?" And sometimes he didn't. At first I told myself it was normal. Children grow up. They build their own lives. They get busy. That's how it's supposed to be. But there was a difference between growing apart and being pushed away. I just didn't see it yet. Or maybe I didn't want to, because deep down I still believed in the boy who used to cover me with a blanket when I fell asleep at the kitchen table. I still believed in my son, and I had no idea that everything I had built for him was about to be used against me. I still remember the first time Michael mentioned her. We were on the phone a quiet Sunday afternoon, the kind we used to share so easily. I had just finished telling him about a patient who reminded me of his father, stubborn, gentle, and impossible to rush, when his tone shifted. "Mom, I met someone." There was something in his voice, a mix of excitement and hesitation. I smiled without even realizing it. "Well, don't keep me waiting. Tell me everything." Her name was Lauren Mitchell. He said she worked in corporate consulting, that she was smart, driven, and different. That word lingered in my mind, though I couldn't quite place why. Different, how I didn't ask. At the time, I was just happy he sounded happy. They had met at a networking event of all places. Michael laughed as he told me how she had corrected him during a conversation about market trends, and how instead of being offended, he found himself impressed. "She's not like anyone I've ever dated," he said. I should have asked more questions then, but I didn't. A few weeks later, he brought her to meet me. I cleaned the house twice that morning, cooked far more food than necessary. Fried chicken, baked mac and cheese, cornbread, everything I knew he loved growing up. When they arrived, Lauren stepped into my home with a smile that was perfectly measured. She was beautiful, no doubt about that. Polished, elegant. The kind of woman who looked like she belonged in a magazine more than in my modest living room. Her hair was sleek, falling neatly past her shoulders. Her clothes were tailored in a way that made me suddenly aware of how simple mine were. But it wasn't her appearance that stayed with me. It was her eyes. They were observant, too observant. She noticed everything. The framed photos on the wall, the age of the furniture, the small cracks in the ceiling I had been meaning to fix for years. And then she smiled again. "It's so nice to finally meet you, Natalie." She said, her voice smooth and warm, but just a little too practiced. I told myself I was imagining things. Dinner went well, at least on the surface. Michael laughed more than I had heard in months. Lauren complimented my cooking, asked polite questions, and listened attentively. But every so often, she would steer the conversation in a direction that felt intentional. "So Natalie," she said at one point, casually cutting into her chicken, "how long have you been working at the hospital?" 35 years, I answered. "That's incredible," she said, her eyebrows lifting slightly. "You must have a very solid retirement plan by now." I paused. It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it, like she was filing the information away. "Oh, I manage," I replied lightly. She smiled again. "Of course. I just admire people who are so financially disciplined." Michael didn't seem to notice anything strange. He was too busy telling stories, filling the space with warmth I hadn't realized I had been missing. But Lauren, she watched. She always watched. After dinner, as I packed leftovers for them to take home, she wandered into the living room. I found her standing in front of a photo of Michael as a child, missing 2 front teeth, holding a baseball glove twice the size of his hand. "He was adorable," she said. "He still is," I replied with a smile. She turned to look at me, her expression softening just slightly. "You must be very proud." "I am." There was a pause, and then she asked it. "So, does he help you out now? Financially, I mean." The question caught me off guard. "No," I said a little more firmly than I intended. "He doesn't need to. I'm doing just fine." She nodded slowly. "Of course," she said. I didn't mean anything by it, just trying to understand the family dynamic. Family dynamic. It sounded clinical, detached, like something to be analyzed, not felt. That night after they left, I stood in the doorway longer than I should have, watching their car disappear down the street. Something didn't sit right with me, but I couldn't explain it. And when Michael called the next day, his voice full of excitement, talking about how much Lauren liked me, how he could really see a future with her, I pushed the feeling aside, because that's what mothers do. We ignore the small doubts in favor of our children's happiness. We tell ourselves we're overthinking. We choose trust. Months passed, and their relationship moved quickly, faster than I expected, faster than I was comfortable with. Before I knew it, Michael was talking about moving in together, then engagement, then a wedding. Each milestone came with less discussion and more announcement. Mom, we're looking at rings. Mom, we're thinking spring for the wedding. Mom, we might move closer to Lauren's office. I noticed something else, too. Our calls became less frequent, and when we did talk, Lauren was often there. Sometimes I could hear her in the background correcting him, finishing his sentences, guiding the conversation in subtle ways. Other times, she would just take the phone. "Hi, Natalie," she'd say brightly. "Michael's in the shower, but I wanted to catch you up on everything." And she would, in detail, about their plans, their finances, their future. It felt like I was being briefed, not included. Still, I told myself this was normal. People change when they fall in love. They build new priorities, new routines, new lives. But deep down, I started to feel something I hadn't felt in years. Like I was standing outside a door that used to be open, and now it was slowly closing. And I wasn't sure if I was still welcome on the other side. I didn't know it then, but that door wasn't just closing, it was being shut, very deliberately, and I was about to find out on just how far Lauren was willing to go to keep it that way. If there's one thing I've learned from working in a hospital for over 3 decades, it's this: when something feels off, it usually is. You just don't always know how serious it is until it's too late. At first, I told myself I was imagining things, that the subtle shift in Michael's behavior was just part of him building a life with Lauren, that the distance I felt wasn't intentional, it was just life. But then the questions started, and they didn't feel normal. It began on a quiet Tuesday evening. Michael called unexpectedly, which in itself had become rare. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, flipping through an old magazine I wasn't really reading when my phone rang. His name lit up the screen. I smiled before answering. "Hey, sweetheart." "Hey, Mom," he said. His tone was warm, but there was something underneath it, hesitation, like he was choosing his words carefully. We talked for a few minutes about nothing in particular, the weather, his job, a coworker who had annoyed him, and then almost casually he asked, "So, have you ever thought about what you're going to do with your savings?" I blinked. "My savings?" "Yeah," he said quickly. "You know, long term, planning ahead." I leaned back in my chair, my fingers tightening slightly around the handle of my cup. "I've managed just fine so far," I said. "Why do you ask?" There was a brief pause. "I don't know," he said. "Lauren and I were just talking about how important it is to have things organized, especially as people get older." There it was again. That word, older. I forced a small laugh. "I'm not on my deathbed, Michael." I didn't say that. He replied a little too quickly. "No," I said softly. "You didn't." The conversation moved on after that, but something had shifted. The question lingered. A few days later, it happened again. This time, they were both on the call. "We've been looking into financial planning services," Lauren said smoothly, her voice calm and controlled. "There are firms that specialize in helping retirees manage their assets more efficiently." "I'm not struggling," I replied. "Of course not," she said immediately, "but that's exactly why it's the perfect time to optimize. You've worked hard for what you have. Why not make sure it's protected? From what, from whom?" I didn't ask the question out loud, but it sat there heavy in my chest. "I appreciate the concern," I said, choosing my words carefully. "But I'm comfortable with how things are." There was a silence on the other end. Not awkward, calculated. Michael cleared his throat. We just want to help Mom. Help. The words sounded different coming from him now. Less like love, more like strategy. Over the next few weeks, the questions became more frequent, more specific. How much do you keep in your checking account? Do you have multiple accounts or just one? Who's listed as your beneficiary? Have you updated your will recently? Each time I gave vague answers. Not lies, but not the full truth either. And each time I could feel Lauren listening more closely than Michael. Sometimes she wouldn't even speak. Just listen. Like she was putting together pieces of something I couldn't yet see. Then one afternoon, I came home to find my file cabinet slightly open. It was a small thing, so small that someone else might not have noticed. But I did, because I always kept it locked. Always. My heart skipped. I walked over slowly, my mind already racing ahead of me. The key was still in my purse, exactly where I had left it that morning, which meant someone had opened it. Without it, I knelt down and pulled the drawer open the rest of the way. Everything looked mostly normal. Folders in place, papers stacked neatly. But as I began flipping through them, I noticed something. One of the folders, the one labeled Financial, was slightly out of alignment, like it had been removed and then put back in a hurry. My hands started to tremble. I opened it. Inside were copies of my bank statements, insurance documents, and retirement information. All the things I had carefully organized over the years, all the things no one else needed access to. I went through each page slowly, deliberately, and then I saw it. A document that wasn't mine. It was a photocopy of my signature. But it wasn't attached to anything, just a loose copy. My breath caught in my throat. Why would someone need a copy of my signature unless... No. I shook my head, trying to push the thought away, but it wouldn't leave. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my mind. The questions, the calls, the way Lauren watched, the way Michael had started to sound less like my son, and more like someone repeating a script. And now this. A copy of my signature. That didn't belong there. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I took a day off from my routine, and I made an appointment. Not with my doctor, not with a friend, but with a lawyer. I didn't tell Michael. I didn't tell anyone. I just sat in that quiet office across from a man who had probably seen stories like mine before, and I told him everything. Or at least, everything I understood. I don't want to accuse anyone without proof, I said, but I don't feel safe with my own finances anymore. He nodded, his expression serious. You're right to be cautious, he said. What you're describing, it raises concerns. My stomach tightened. What kind of concerns? He leaned forward slightly. Potential financial exploitation. The words hit harder than I expected. Exploitation. From my own family, I want to protect myself, I said quietly. And you should, he replied. That day, we put safeguards in place, things I never thought I would need. Account alerts, restricted access, legal protections that ensured no one could make changes without my direct authorization. It felt surreal, like I was preparing for something I didn't fully understand yet. But deep down, I knew one thing. Something was coming, and for the first time, I wasn't going to be unprepared. I just didn't realize how soon everything would explode, or that the next time I stood in front of my son, it would be in a bank with him trying to take everything from me in broad daylight. After that meeting with the lawyer, something inside me changed. Not all at once, but enough. Enough to make me watch more carefully, listen more closely, and trust a little less blindly than I had before. I didn't confront Michael again, not yet. I didn't accuse Lauren. I didn't even mention the file cabinet. Instead, I did what I had always done best. I stayed quiet, and I paid attention. A week later, Michael called again. This time his tone was lighter, almost rehearsed in its calmness. Hey, Mom, he said. Lauren and I were thinking, maybe we should come visit this weekend. That alone would have made me happy once. Now it made me cautious. Of course, I said. You're always welcome. They arrived Saturday afternoon. Lauren stepped out of the car first wearing a soft beige coat that probably cost more than I used to spend on groceries for a month. Michael followed, carrying a small box of pastries like it was some kind of offering. He smiled when he saw me, but it didn't reach his eyes. We exchanged hugs, his quick hers calculated, and went inside. Everything felt staged, like we were all playing roles we didn't fully believe in. I made coffee, set out the pastries, tried to keep things normal. For a while, it worked. We talked about harmless things, weather work, a new restaurant Lauren had tried. Michael laughed a little. Lauren smiled a lot. But underneath it all, I could feel it. Something building, waiting. And then just as I was clearing the table, Lauren spoke. "Natalie," she said gently, "we wanted to talk to you about something important." I turned slowly, drying my hands on a dish towel. "All right." Michael shifted in his seat. He didn't look at me. Lauren leaned forward slightly, her voice soft but deliberate. "We've been doing a lot of research lately about financial safety for seniors." There it was again, seniors. "I see," I said. "And one thing that keeps coming up," she continued, "is how vulnerable people can become without realizing it. Scams, mismanagement, even simple mistakes that can cost thousands." I walked back to the table and sat down across from them. "I'm very careful with my money," I said. "I know," she replied quickly. "That's exactly why we think it would be smart to take an extra step." Michael finally spoke. "Mom, we think it would be best if I were added to your account." The words landed between us like a stone dropped into still water. I didn't react right away. I just looked at him. "Added how I asked calmly? As a joint account holder," he said, "so I can help manage things, make sure everything's protected." Protected, that word again. "And whose idea was this?" I asked. Michael hesitated. Lauren didn't. "It's something we both agree on," she said smoothly. "Of course you do," I thought. I folded my hands in my lap. "I'm not comfortable with that," I said. The room went still. Michael frowned slightly. "Why not?" "Because I don't need anyone managing my finances," I replied. "I've done just fine on my own for a long time." Lauren's smile didn't disappear, but it changed. It tightened. "Natalie," she said gently, "this isn't about what you can or can't do. It's about being proactive." "I am being proactive," I said. "Then you'll understand why this makes sense," she pressed. "No." I said, my voice firmer now. "I understand why it makes sense to you." Michael's expression hardened. "Mom, we're just trying to help. Help with what I asked. My bills are paid, my accounts are stable. What exactly do you think I'm at risk of?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. Lauren stepped in again. "It's not about immediate risk," she said. "It's about long-term planning, avoiding complications later on, making things easier for everyone, for everyone." There it was. Not for me, for everyone. "I appreciate your concern," I said slowly, "but the answer is no." The silence that followed was heavier this time. Not polite, not neutral, tense. Michael leaned back in his chair, his jaw tightening. "I don't understand why you're being so stubborn about this." Stubborn. The word stung more than I expected. "I'm not being stubborn," I said. "I'm setting a boundary." Lauren exhaled softly like she was trying to remain patient. "We're only asking because we care," she said. "No," I replied quietly. "You're asking because you want control. That did it." Michael sat up straight. "That's not fair, isn't it?" I asked, meeting his eyes. "Because lately, that's exactly what it feels like." He looked away. Lauren's expression cooled. "I think you're misunderstanding our intentions," she said. "I think I'm understanding them perfectly," I replied. The air between us shifted again, this time unmistakably. The conversation ended shortly after that. Not with resolution, but with distance. They stayed for another hour, but the warmth was gone, replaced by something colder, sharper. When they finally left, Michael barely hugged me. Lauren smiled as always, but this time it didn't even pretend to reach her eyes. As I stood in the doorway watching their car pull away, I felt something settle deep in my chest. Not fear, not confusion, clarity. This wasn't concern. This wasn't love. This was pressure. And when pressure didn't work, People like Lauren didn't just walk away. They escalated. I closed the door slowly, my hand lingering on the handle. For the first time, I allowed myself to think the thought I had been avoiding. This isn't going to stop, and whatever they were planning, they weren't done yet. After that visit, the silence between us wasn't accidental anymore. It was intentional. Days passed without a call, then a week, then 2. At first I told myself I didn't mind, that I had lived most of my life without depending on anyone and I could certainly do it again. But the truth was, it hurt. Not the silence itself, but what it meant. Still, I didn't reach out. I waited, and while I waited, I watched. The safeguards I had put in place with my lawyer gave me some comfort. Alerts were now tied to my accounts. Any unusual activity would trigger a notification. Access was restricted. Changes required direct confirmation. It was more protection than I had ever needed before, or at least more than I had ever thought I would need. Then one afternoon, I received the first alert. I was in my living room folding laundry while an old sitcom played quietly in the background when my phone buzzed. A banking notification. Unrecognized login attempt. My hands froze mid-fold. I stared at the screen, my heart beginning to beat faster. The login attempt had been blocked. Location Columbus, Ohio. That was where Michael lived. I swallowed hard. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe it was nothing, but deep down, I knew better. I set the laundry aside and sat down slowly. A second notification came in minutes later. Another attempt, blocked again, same location. My chest tightened. This wasn't a mistake. This was someone trying deliberately to access my account. I picked up the phone and called the bank immediately. After verifying my identity, I explained what had happened. The representative's tone shifted as she reviewed the activity. "I see the attempts," she said. "They were flagged by your security settings. No access was granted. Can you tell who made them?" I asked. There was a pause. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we can only confirm the location and device type, not the individual." "Of course. Is there anything else I should do?" "You've already taken strong precautions," she said, "but given the repeated attempts, I would recommend adding an additional layer of verification and possibly notifying your legal advisor." "I will," I said quietly. After the call ended, I sat there for a long time, not moving, not thinking, just feeling. The confirmation I had been avoiding was now staring me in the face. Someone I knew, someone close, was trying to get into my account. That evening, I called my lawyer. He didn't sound surprised. In situations like this, he said it's common for individuals to escalate when initial efforts fail. Escalate. The words sent a chill down my spine. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," he replied, "carefully, you should be prepared for more direct actions." I knew exactly what he meant, and I hated that I did. The next few days were quiet again, too quiet. And then just when I started to think maybe things had settled, I came home to find something that made my stomach drop. The front door was closed, locked, just as I had left it, but something felt wrong. I couldn't explain it, not at first. I stepped inside slowly, my eyes scanning the room. Everything looked normal, the couch, the table, the photos on the wall, all in place. But then I noticed it, the faintest smell, not mine, a scent I didn't recognize, subtle, but there. My heart began to pound. I walked further into the house, each step heavier than the last. The kitchen looked untouched, the bedroom unchanged, and then I reached the hallway. The file cabinet. My breath caught. The drawer was closed, but not all the way, just slightly, enough for me to notice. I walked toward it slowly, my fingers trembling as I reached out and pulled it open. Inside, everything was neat, too neat, more organized than I had left it. That was the first sign. The second came when I opened the financial folder again. This time something was missing, a document, a specific one. My latest bank statement, the most recent record of my account balance, gone. I flipped through the folder again, faster, now panic rising in my chest. It wasn't there. Someone had taken it, not copied it, taken it. I stumbled back slightly, gripping the edge of the cabinet to steady myself. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was proof. Someone had been in my house, gone through my private documents, and taken exactly what they needed. I didn't call Michael. I didn't call Lauren. I called the police. It felt strange dialing that number for something like this, like I was crossing a line I could never uncross. But the moment I heard the dispatcher's voice, I knew I had made the right decision. I explained everything. The previous incident, the login attempts, the missing document. Within 30 minutes, an officer was at my door. He was calm, professional. Asked all the right questions. "Do you have any reason to believe someone specific might be involved?" he asked. I hesitated, because saying it out loud would make it real. "I have concerns," I said carefully. He nodded. "We'll document everything. In the meantime, I strongly recommend changing your locks." I almost laughed. Locks, as if that was the problem. As if this wasn't already far beyond something that simple. After he left, I sat alone in my living room, the silence heavier than ever. I looked around at the house I had built piece by piece. The place that had once felt safe, and now it didn't. Not completely, not anymore. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hold something steady inside me. But one thought kept rising above the rest. This wasn't random. This wasn't a stranger. This was someone who knew exactly where to look, exactly what to take, exactly how far they could go, without getting caught. And if they were willing to come into my home, then there was nothing left holding them back. Whatever came next wouldn't be subtle, and I had a feeling it was coming very soon. After the police officer left, the house felt different. Not physically, but emotionally. Every corner held a question. Every shadow carried doubt. I had lived in that home for over 20 years, and for the first time, it no longer felt like a place where I could let my guard down. So I didn't. That same evening, I called a locksmith and had every lock in the house changed. Not just the front door, all of them. Windows reinforced, security cameras installed, motion sensors activated. It felt excessive, but it also felt necessary, because whoever had walked into my home that day hadn't been afraid, and that terrified me more than anything else. That night, I barely slept. Every sound felt louder. Every creak of the floor made my heart race. I kept my phone within reach, the lights on longer than usual, my mind replaying the same question over and over again. Was it Michael? Or was it Lauren? Or both? The next morning, I decided I couldn't stay silent any longer. I picked up my phone and called Michael. It rang twice before he answered. "Hey, Mom." His voice sounded normal. Too normal. "We need to talk," I said. There was a pause. "About what?" "About my house," I replied. "About my accounts, about everything." Another pause. Longer this time. "I'm kind of busy right now," he said. "Can this wait?" "No," I said firmly. "It can't." Silence stretched between us. Then he sighed. "All right," he said. "What's going on?" I took a breath. "Someone tried to access my bank account," I said. "Twice. From Columbus." No response. And yesterday, I continued, my voice tightening. Someone was inside my house. They went through my files. They took documents. Still nothing. My heart pounded in my chest. "Michael," I said, quieter now, "do you know anything about this?" The silence that followed was deafening. "I think you're overreacting," he finally said. The words hit me like a slap. "Overreacting," I repeated. "Yes," he said, his tone sharpening. "Mom, you've been on edge lately. You're jumping to conclusions." "Jumping to conclusions," I echoed. "Someone broke into my house." "Did they?" though he replied. "Or did you misplace something and convince yourself I did not misplace my bank statement?" I cut in, my voice rising for the first time. He went quiet again. And in that silence, something shifted. Not in him, in me. Because for the first time, I realized something I hadn't wanted to accept before. He wasn't confused. He wasn't concerned. He was dismissing me, deliberately. "Why are you doing this?" I asked softly. "Doing what? Acting like I'm losing my mind." "I'm not saying that," he said quickly. "Yes, you are," I replied. "That's exactly what you're saying. I'm just saying maybe you're stressed," he insisted. You've been alone a lot. It happens." There it was, the narrative. The same one he had used at the bank, the same one Lauren had been planting all along. I felt something inside me break. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like a thread snapping under too much pressure. "I'm not confused." I said each word steady now. "I'm not imagining things, and I'm not going to let you make me feel like I am." "Mom." "No," I cut him off. "You listen to me." My voice didn't shake this time. "I don't know what Lauren has told you. I don't know what you've convinced yourself of, but someone is trying to access my money. Someone was in my house. And if you know anything about it, anything at all, you need to tell me right now." Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. And then, "I don't," he said. 2 words. Flat. Final. I closed my eyes. "Then you need to start asking yourself, who does?" I said quietly. He didn't respond. Neither did I. The call ended shortly after that. Not with resolution. Not with understanding. But with distance. A deeper kind than before. I sat there for a long time after hanging up, staring at the phone in my hand, waiting for it to ring again. It didn't. Later that afternoon, I received another notification. Not from the bank, from my security system. Motion detected. My breath caught as I opened the app. The camera feed loaded slowly. Too slowly, and then there it was. A figure standing at my front door. My heart stopped. It was Lauren. She wasn't knocking, she wasn't calling, she was just standing there, looking at the door, waiting. I watched as she stepped back slightly, her eyes scanning the exterior, taking in the new camera, the reinforced locks. Her expression changed. Not surprise, not confusion, annoyance. Then after a moment, she turned and walked away. Just like that. No attempt to hide, no attempt to explain, like she had every right to be there, like she expected the door to open. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. That was all the confirmation I needed. It wasn't random, it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was them. Or at least, it was her. And Michael. Whether he knew or not, he had chosen a side. That night, I didn't feel scared anymore. I felt something else. Something stronger, clearer, resolve. Because now there was no more doubt, no more hesitation, no more benefit of the doubt to give. They had crossed a line, and whatever they were planning, they weren't going to stop, which meant neither could I. The next move had to be mine. By the time I walked into the bank that morning, I had already made up my mind. No more waiting, no more wondering. I needed clarity, and I needed it now. The branch sat on a quiet corner in downtown Cleveland, the same one I had been using for years. It was familiar, predictable, safe, or at least it used to feel that way. I pushed the glass doors open and stepped inside, the cool air brushing against my skin. The low hum of conversation, the soft clicking of keyboards, the steady rhythm of a place that thrived on routine, it all felt strangely distant, like I didn't quite belong there anymore. I walked up to the counter, offering a polite smile to the young teller. "Good morning," I said. "I'd like to speak with someone about my account. Privately, if possible." She nodded. "Of course, ma'am. One moment." As she turned away, I felt a familiar tightening in my chest. Not fear, anticipation, because something told me this wasn't going to be a simple conversation. A few minutes later, I was led into a small office. Neutral walls, a desk too clean, a chair that wasn't quite comfortable. I sat down, folding my hands in my lap, trying to steady my breathing, and then the door opened. But it wasn't the bank manager who walked in. It was Michael. Behind him, Lauren. For a second, my mind refused to process what I was seeing. Then everything clicked into place. This wasn't a coincidence. This was planned. Michael stepped into the room like he belonged there. Lauren followed calm and composed as always, closing the door softly behind her. "Natalie," she said, her voice smooth. "I'm glad you came in." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just looked at them. Really looked this time. At the distance in my son's eyes. At the quiet control in Lauren's posture. And something inside me went cold. "What is this?" I asked. Finally, my voice low, Michael pulled out a chair across from me and sat down. "We need to talk," he said. I let out a short, humorless breath. "That's funny," I replied. "I was just thinking the same thing." Lauren remained standing for a moment, then took the seat beside him. "This doesn't have to be difficult," she said gently. "Then don't make it that way," I shot back. There was a brief pause. Then Michael leaned forward slightly. "Mom, we've been going over your financial situation." My fingers tightened in my lap. "You've been what?" "We're concerned." He continued ignoring my question. "There are inconsistencies, gaps, things that don't make sense." "That's not true," I said immediately. "We're not accusing you of anything," Lauren added smoothly. "But we do think it's time to take some precautions." "Precautions?" I almost laughed. "Like breaking into my house?" I asked sharply. Michael's jaw tightened. "No one broke into your house. I have proof that someone was there," I snapped. "And I know it wasn't me." Lauren raised a hand slightly, as if calming the situation. "This is exactly what we're talking about," she said softly. "You're under a lot of stress. It's affecting your perception." My heart pounded. There was nothing wrong with my perception. I said each word deliberate. Michael exhaled slowly. "Mom, please just listen. I didn't want to, but I did." "Given everything that's happened," he continued, "we think it would be best if we temporarily restricted access to your account." The words hit harder than anything he had said before. Restricted. How, I asked, though I already knew. He hesitated, just for a second. Then he said it. By freezing it. The room went silent. I felt something inside me crack, not loudly, not dramatically, but deep enough that I knew it would never fully mend. "You want to freeze my account," I repeated. "It's for your protection," Lauren said quickly. "No," I said, shaking my head slowly. "It's for your control." "That's not fair," Michael said, his voice rising slightly. "Isn't it?" I replied. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're trying to take everything I've worked for." "That's not what this is about," he insisted. "Then what is it about?" I demanded. Neither of them answered, and that silence said everything. A knock on the door broke the tension. The teller stepped in holding a folder. "Mr. Carter requested access to the account file," she said, glancing between us. "I just need confirmation before proceeding." Michael nodded. "Yes, that's fine." She looked at me. I didn't say anything, didn't move, didn't blink. Because in that moment, I realized something. This had already gone further than I thought. Much further. The teller hesitated, then placed the folder on the desk and opened it. Michael gestured toward it. "Go ahead," he said. She flipped through a few pages, scanning quickly, and then she stopped. Her expression changed, subtly at first, then completely. Her eyes moved back to the top of the page, then to me, then back again. The room shifted. I could feel it. Michael noticed too. "What is it?" he asked. The teller didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned another page, then another. Her posture straightened slightly. Her tone, when she finally spoke, was no longer casual. "Sir," she said carefully, "I need to clarify something before we proceed." Michael frowned. "What kind of clarification?" She looked at him directly. "This account has been placed under a protective status." The words hung in the air. Lauren's expression tightened. "What does that mean?" she asked. The teller didn't look at her. She was looking at me. "It means," she said slowly, "that any attempt to alter, restrict, or access this account without direct authorization from the account holder will be flagged and investigated." Silence. Heavy, immediate. Michael's face changed. Confusion, then irritation. "What are you talking about?" he said. "I'm her son." "And that does not grant you access," the teller replied calmly. Lauren leaned forward slightly. "There must be some mistake," she said. The teller shook her head. "No, ma'am, there's no mistake." She turned the file slightly, just enough for me to see. And in that moment, everything became clear. Because I recognized it. The documentation, the signatures, the safeguards, the ones I had put in place, the ones they didn't know about, and for the first time since this began, I wasn't the one on the defensive anymore. I sat back, slowly meeting my son's eyes. "You should have thought this through more carefully," I said. Michael stared at me, and for the first time, he looked unsure. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence inside that small office felt heavier than anything I had experienced before. Not just tension, but a shift. A quiet, undeniable turning of the tide. Michael looked from the teller to me, confusion written across his face. "What do you mean, protective status?" he asked, his voice sharper now. "Who authorized that?" The teller didn't rush her answer. She flipped back a page in the file, her finger tracing a line as if making absolutely certain before she spoke again. "The account holder did," she said calmly. Michael's eyes snapped toward me. "You?" he asked. I didn't respond immediately. I just held his gaze steady, unshaken for the first time in what felt like months. "Yes," I said. Lauren shifted beside him, her posture tightening almost imperceptibly. "That's not possible," she said quickly. "Natalie, you never mentioned anything about this." I let out a quiet breath. "There are a lot of things I didn't mention," I replied. The room went still again. Michael leaned back slightly, running a hand through his hair. The confidence he had walked in with, the certainty, was beginning to crack. "When did you do this?" he asked. "A while ago," I said. "Right around the time things started feeling off." Lauren's eyes narrowed just slightly. "What exactly does this protective status involve?" She asked, her tone controlled but edged with something sharper now. The teller answered without hesitation. "It means the account is under enhanced monitoring," she said. "Any unusual activity is flagged immediately. Any request to modify access, freeze funds, or add authorized users requires direct verified consent from Miss Long, along with additional legal review." Michael frowned. "That's ridiculous. I'm her son. And that doesn't override her authorization," the teller replied. There was no emotion in her voice now, just policy. Lauren leaned forward, her composure slipping just enough to reveal frustration. "So you're saying he has no authority at all?" she pressed. "I'm saying," the teller responded evenly, "that no one has authority over this account except the account holder." I could feel Lauren's control beginning to fracture. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, but it was there, in the slight tightening of her jaw, in the way her fingers pressed a little too firmly against the edge of the desk. Michael turned back to me. "Why would you do this without telling me?" he asked, his voice softer now, but still carrying an edge. I studied him for a moment. Really studied him. "I didn't think I needed to explain how I protect my own money," I said. "That's not what I meant," he said quickly. "I mean, why would you assume something like this was necessary?" I let out a slow breath. "Because you and your wife started asking questions that didn't feel like concern," I said. "They felt like preparation." Lauren scoffed lightly. "That's an unfair interpretation." "No," I replied calmly. "It's an accurate one." Michael shook his head. "We were just trying to help." "By trying to freeze my account?" I asked. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The answer, whatever it was, didn't come, and that silence again said more than any explanation could. The teller flipped another page in the file. "There's something else," she said. All three of us looked at her. "This account has also been flagged for attempted unauthorized access within the past week." Michael's head snapped up. "What?" My heart beat a little faster. This was it. The moment everything started to come into the light. "There were multiple login attempts from an unrecognized device," the teller continued. "They were blocked by the security system." Lauren's voice came quickly. "That doesn't prove anything." "No," the teller agreed, "but it does establish a pattern." Michael turned to me again, his expression tightening. "You think that was me?" he asked. I didn't answer right away, because the truth was, I didn't know exactly what he knew, but I knew enough. "I think someone close to me tried to access my account without my permission," I said carefully. Lauren let out a sharp breath. "This is getting out of hand." "Is it?" I asked, turning to her. "Yes," she said firmly. "You're making serious accusations without evidence." I held her gaze. "The evidence is in my house," I said. "In my missing documents, in the security alerts, in the fact that you showed up at my door without telling me." For the first time, Lauren didn't have an immediate response, just a flicker, a crack. Michael looked between us, his expression shifting again, this time not just confused, but unsettled. "Lauren," he said slowly, "what is she talking about?" Her head turned toward him, her face composed once more. "I don't know," she said. "She's clearly under a lot of stress." There it was again. That same narrative, that same quiet attempt to rewrite reality. But this time, it didn't land the same way, because now there were witnesses, there were records, there was a file sitting open on a desk that told a very different story. The teller cleared her throat slightly. "Given the circumstances, she said we may need to escalate this to our fraud prevention team for further review." Lauren's head snapped back toward her. "That's not necessary, it's standard procedure," the teller replied. Michael shifted in his seat, his confidence now visibly shaken. "What does that involve?" he asked. "It means a full review of recent activities," she said, "including login attempts, document access, and any requests made regarding the account." The air in the room changed again. Not just tension, pressure, real pressure. And for the first time since this began, it wasn't on me. Lauren sat back slowly, her expression unreadable. Michael looked down at the desk, his hands clasped tightly together. And I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not fear, not doubt, but certainty. Because the truth was no longer something I had to defend. It was something they had to answer for. I leaned back in my chair, my voice calm but firm. "I think that would be a very good idea." Lauren's eyes flicked toward me. Sharp, calculating. But this time, there was something else there too. Something she hadn't shown before. Concern. And Michael. He looked like a man standing at the edge of something he didn't fully understand yet, but was about to. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Because once the truth starts to surface, it doesn't stop halfway. If there's one thing people don't expect from someone like me, it's preparation. They see a woman my age and assume softness, simplicity, predictability. They assume I won't see it coming, that I won't understand what's happening until it's already too late. Lauren assumed that. Maybe Michael did too. But what they didn't realize, what they couldn't possibly have known, was that I had already been preparing for this moment long before we ever stepped into that bank. And now, the truth was starting to show itself. The teller closed the file slowly, her posture more formal, now her tone more measured. "Miss Long," she said, turning to me, "given the security flags on your account, I'd recommend we bring in a senior manager and a member of our fraud prevention team." I nodded without hesitation. "I agree." Lauren shifted in her seat. "That's really not necessary," she said, her voice still controlled, but thinner now, less certain. "It is," I replied, not even looking at her. "If everything is as innocent as you say, then there shouldn't be a problem." She didn't answer, because for the first time, she didn't have control over how this conversation would unfold. Michael exhaled slowly beside her, his eyes fixed on the desk. "Mom," he said quietly, "this is getting bigger than it needs to be." I turned to him. "No," I said, "it's finally getting as big as it should have been from the beginning." The door opened a few minutes later. A man in his early 50s stepped in dressed in a dark suit, his expression calm but focused. Behind him was a woman holding a tablet, her badge identifying her as part of the bank's fraud prevention department. They introduced themselves briefly, then took seats across from us. The atmosphere in the room shifted immediately. This was no longer a family disagreement. This was an investigation. The woman from fraud prevention began by reviewing the account activity. "Miss Long," she said, "we're seeing multiple blocked login attempts over the past week, all originating from a single geographic area. Columbus," I said. She nodded. "Yes." Michael shifted beside me. "That doesn't mean anything," he said quickly. "A lot of people live in Columbus." "Of course," she replied calmly, "which is why we also look at device signatures." Lauren's head turned slightly. "Device signatures," she repeated. The woman tapped her tablet. Each login attempt leaves a digital footprint, she explained. In this case, the attempts came from the same device, used consistently over a short period of time. The room went quiet. Michael's brow furrowed. And what does that prove, he asked. It tells us, she said, that whoever was attempting access was persistent and familiar with the account. I felt my chest tighten slightly, not out of fear, but out of recognition. Because this was it. The moment everything I had suspected began to align with something undeniable. The man in the suit turned to me. Miss Long, can you tell us when you first became concerned about your account security? I nodded. A few weeks ago, I said, after I noticed unusual questions being asked about my finances. Lauren shifted again but didn't speak. I also found evidence that my personal documents had been accessed without my permission. I continued, and shortly after that, the login attempts began. The man nodded, taking notes. Did you report the document access, he asked? Yes, I said. I contacted the police. That caught Michael's attention. You called the police, he said, turning to me. Yes, I replied simply. His expression changed. Not anger, not yet, but something close to it. Don't you think that's a bit extreme, he asked. I held his gaze. Not when someone enters my home and takes financial documents, I said. He looked away. Lauren finally spoke. This is all based on assumptions, she said, her voice steady but tight. There's no proof that any of this is connected. The woman from fraud prevention looked up from her tablet. Actually, she said there may be. Lauren's eyes flicked toward her. What do you mean? She turned the screen slightly, just enough for the man in the suit to see, but not fully toward us. This device, she said, tapping the screen, has been used to access other accounts in the past. Legitimately. Michael leaned forward slightly. Whose accounts, he asked. The woman paused, then looked directly at him. Yours. The word landed like a hammer. Michael froze. What? He stammered. This device matches the one you've used for your own banking activities, she said calmly. The room went completely silent. I felt my heartbeat in my ears, not because I was surprised, but because hearing it out loud made it real in a way nothing else had. Michael shook his head quickly. That doesn't mean I was trying to access her account, he said. I mean, we share devices sometimes. Lauren uses my laptop. Lauren's head snapped toward him. Michael, she said sharply, too sharply, the room caught it. All of us, including the investigators. The man in the suit leaned forward slightly. Ma'am, he said to Lauren, have you used Mr. Carter's device to attempt access to Miss Long's account? Lauren didn't answer immediately. For the first time since I had met her, she hesitated. And in that hesitation, everything changed. I think this line of questioning is inappropriate, she said finally, her voice colder now. It's directly relevant, the man replied. No, she said firmly, it's speculative. The woman from fraud prevention didn't look convinced. Speculation becomes concern when patterns emerge, she said. Lauren stood up suddenly. This is ridiculous, she said. We came here to help, not to be interrogated. Michael looked up at her, uncertainty written all over his face. Lauren, he started, but she was already gathering her things. We're leaving, she said. She turned toward the door, and for a moment no one moved to stop her, because everyone in that room understood something now. She wasn't leaving because she was offended. She was leaving because the truth was getting too close. Michael hesitated, then looked at me. Really looked at me, for the first time that day. Without defensiveness, without certainty, just doubt. Mom, he said quietly, but I didn't respond, because whatever he was about to say was already too late. Lauren opened the door, stepped out, and didn't look back. Michael followed a second later, but slower, like he wasn't entirely sure where he belonged anymore. The door closed behind them, and the room fell silent once again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It wasn't tense. It was clear. The man in the suit turned to me. We're going to continue this investigation, he said. Based on what we've seen, there are enough indicators to proceed further. I nodded. Thank you. As they gathered their materials, I sat there for a moment longer, alone, but not powerless, not confused, not afraid, because now the truth wasn't just something I felt, it was something that could be proven, and once that process started, there was no going back. The moment the door closed behind Michael and Lauren, the air in the room shifted again, but this time, it was different. Lighter, clearer. For the first time since this all began, I wasn't bracing myself for what might happen next. I was watching it unfold. The man in the suit, Mr. Reynolds, as he had introduced himself, closed the file in front of him and leaned forward slightly. "Miss Long," he said, "I want to walk you through what we're seeing so far." I nodded. "Please." The woman from Fraud Prevention turned her tablet toward him, pulling up a series of timestamps and logs. "We've identified 6 separate login attempts over the past 9 days," she began, "all blocked due to the security measures on your account." I exhaled slowly. 6. More than I had even realized. All originating from the same device, she continued, the same IP range, and the same behavioral pattern. "Behavioral pattern?" I asked. She nodded. "The attempts weren't random," she explained. "They followed a specific sequence username, input password variations, then a pause, followed by a reset attempt." My stomach tightened. "That doesn't sound like guessing," I said. "It's not," she replied. "It suggests familiarity with the account structure." Mr. Reynolds tapped the table lightly. In plain terms, he said whoever was trying to access your account knew enough to believe they could get in. I leaned back slightly in my chair, my hands resting in my lap. "That's what I was afraid of," I said quietly. The woman scrolled further. "There's more," she added. Of course there was. There were also 2 attempted requests to initiate account changes, she said, both flagged and denied automatically due to your protective status. I looked up sharply. "What kind of changes?" She met my eyes. "Adding an authorized user and initiating a temporary freeze." The room went still. For a moment, I couldn't speak, because those weren't just random actions. Those were the exact things Michael and Lauren had just asked for, sitting across from me in this very room. Mr. Reynolds didn't miss the connection. "That aligns with what we witnessed earlier," he said. "Yes," I replied, my voice steady now. "It does." The woman from Fraud Prevention continued. "We've also cross-referenced the device used in these attempts with known activity tied to Mr. Carter's accounts," she said. "There is a match." I closed my eyes briefly, not out of shock, but out of confirmation, because hearing it from them removed any remaining doubt. Michael was connected to this, whether directly or through someone else. Mr. Reynolds leaned back slightly, his expression thoughtful. "At this point," he said, "we're looking at potential unauthorized access attempts tied to a known associate of the account holder." "That's a formal way of saying it," I said quietly. He nodded. "It is." And informally, I asked. He met my gaze. "It means someone close to you tried to access your money without permission." There it was, plain, unfiltered, the truth I had been circling for weeks. I let out a slow breath. "I understand." The woman tapped her tablet again. "There's one more detail," she said. I looked up. "The timing of the login attempts coincides with specific events," she explained. "Moments when your account balance would have been recently updated." My brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "For example," she said, "scrolling there was an attempt the morning after your latest pension deposit. Another the day after a transfer into your savings account." My chest tightened. "They were watching," I said. "Yes," she replied, "or they had access to information that allowed them to anticipate those changes. Information, like a bank statement, the one that had gone missing from my house." The realization settled heavily in my chest. "They took it," I whispered. Mr. Reynolds looked at me. "Miss Long." "My bank statement," I said. "The one that disappeared, it had my latest balance on it." The 2 investigators exchanged a glance. "That would explain the timing," he said. The room fell quiet again, but this time, it wasn't uncertainty. It was clarity. Everything was connecting, every question, every action, every step they had taken. It all pointed in one direction. Lauren and Michael. I swallowed hard. Michael had been the one sitting in that chair, the one asking to freeze my account, the one standing beside her. Even if he hadn't planned it, he had participated. Mr. Reynolds closed the file. Based on what we have, he said we'll be filing an internal report and forwarding the case for further review. This may extend beyond the bank, depending on what's uncovered. I nodded slowly. I understand. The woman from fraud prevention softened her tone slightly. You did the right thing by putting those protections in place, she said. Without them, the outcome could have been very different. I let that sink in, because she was right. If I hadn't trusted my instincts, if I hadn't acted when I did, I might have walked into that bank that morning and walked out with nothing. Mr. Reynolds stood. We'll keep you informed as things progress, he said. In the meantime, your account remains fully secured. Thank you, I replied. They gathered their materials and left the room, closing the door quietly behind them. And just like that, I was alone again. But it didn't feel the same as before, because now I wasn't alone with questions. I was alone with answers. I sat there for a long moment staring at the empty chairs across from me, the ones Michael and Lauren had occupied just minutes earlier. It felt strange. How quickly everything had changed. How quickly the illusion had broken. I thought about Michael, about the boy he had been, the young man I had raised, the son who used to call me every Sunday, and I wondered, at what point had he become someone I didn't recognize? Or had he always been capable of this, and I had just chosen not to see it? The thought hurt more than I expected, but I didn't push it away, because avoiding the truth was what had brought me here in the first place, and I wasn't going to make that mistake again. I stood up slowly, smoothing my hands over my coat. For the first time in weeks, I felt steady. Not because everything was resolved, but because I finally understood what I was dealing with. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't miscommunication. This was betrayal. Calculated, deliberate, and now it was exposed. I walked out of the office and into the main lobby of the bank. The same quiet hum greeted me, the same routine, the same normalcy. But I wasn't the same person who had walked in earlier, because now I wasn't just protecting myself. I was preparing for what came next, and something told me this story wasn't over yet, not even close. I thought the hardest part would be hearing the truth. I was wrong. The hardest part was watching it unfold. 3 days after the meeting at the bank, I received a call, not from Michael, not from Lauren, from Mr. Reynolds. Miss Long, he said, his tone more formal than before we've completed a preliminary review. I believe you should come in. Something in his voice told me this wasn't routine, so I went. The bank felt quieter that morning, though I knew it was just my perception. I was led back into a larger office this time. Not the small one from before. This one had space and witnesses. Mr. Reynolds was there. So was the woman from fraud prevention. And then Michael. He was already seated when I walked in, alone. Lauren wasn't there. That was the first thing I noticed. The second was his face. He looked different, not angry, not defensive, just shaken. His eyes met mine as I stepped into the room. "Mom," he said softly. I didn't respond. I took my seat across from him, my posture straight, my expression calm, because whatever this was, I wasn't going to walk into it unprepared. Yeah, Mr. Reynolds cleared his throat. "Thank you both for coming," he said. "We've gathered additional information that we believe is relevant to the situation." Michael shifted slightly in his chair. "What kind of information?" he asked. The woman from fraud prevention tapped her tablet. "We were able to trace the device activity more precisely," she said, "including usage patterns, login times, and cross-referenced access points." Michael nodded slowly, though it was clear he didn't fully understand, and he pressed. She hesitated, not out of uncertainty, but out of weight. "While the device is registered under your name," she said, "the activity associated with the unauthorized attempts does not match your typical usage patterns." Michael blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said carefully, "that while your device was used, the behavior suggests a different user." The room went quiet. Michael frowned. Are you saying someone else used my laptop? Yes, she replied. His eyes widened slightly. But how would you know that? She turned the tablet slightly, showing him a series of graphs and timestamps. You typically access your accounts during business hours, she explained. These attempts occurred late at night. Additionally, the navigation patterns differ. Faster input, repeated retries, more aggressive access attempts. Michael stared at the screen. That's not me, he said quietly. I know, she replied. And just like that, the room shifted again. Not toward confusion, but toward clarity. Michael leaned back slowly, running a hand over his face. Then who? He stopped, mid-sentence, because the answer was already there. He just hadn't said it yet. I watched him carefully. Every movement, every realization as it surfaced, and then he looked up, not at the investigators, at me, and I saw it, the moment it hit him. Lauren, he whispered. The name hung in the air, heavy, unavoidable. Mr. Reynolds didn't interrupt, didn't guide. He just let the silence do its work. Michael's breathing changed, faster now, uneven. She uses my laptop all the time, he said, more to himself than anyone else. At home, at night, when I'm asleep or working late. He trailed off. The pieces were coming together, too quickly, too clearly, and there was nothing left to shield him from them. She said she was helping me manage things, he continued, that she understood finances better, that she could keep track of things I might miss. His voice cracked slightly. I trusted her. No one spoke, because there was nothing to say. The truth had found its way out on its own. Michael looked at me again. This time, differently. Not defensive, not dismissive, but broken. I didn't know he said 3 words, simple but heavy with everything they carried. I held his gaze, and for a moment, I saw the boy he used to be. The one who used to sit at the kitchen table waiting for me to come home. The one who used to worry when I worked too hard. The one who would never have imagined hurting me like this. I believe that, I said quietly. His shoulders dropped slightly as if something inside him had been holding tight and finally loosened. But you still stood beside her, I continued. The words landed gently, but they landed. He closed his eyes. I know, he said. And you still tried to freeze my account, I added. His head lowered. I thought... He started, then stopped, because whatever he thought didn't matter anymore, not in the face of what had actually happened. The woman from fraud prevention spoke again. We've also identified attempted document usage, she said. Information that appears to have been taken from physical records. I felt my chest tighten. The bank statement, I said. She nodded. Michael looked up sharply. What bank statement? The one that disappeared from my house, I replied. His face went pale. She was there, he said. It wasn't a question. It was a realization. She told me she stopped by to drop something off. He continued slowly, that you weren't home, but she didn't want to disturb you. I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because now he understood. Everything, the questions, the pressure, the access attempts, the visit to my house, it all pointed to one person. And for the first time, Michael wasn't defending her. He was seeing her, clearly. Mr. Reynolds closed the file. Based on what we have, he said we will be escalating this matter for further investigation. There is sufficient evidence to suggest intentional, unauthorized access and potential financial exploitation. Michael nodded slowly, not arguing, not resisting, just accepting the truth, as painful as it was. I sat there watching him, and I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not satisfaction, something more complicated than that, because this wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about realization. And sometimes, realization hurts more than anything else. Michael looked at me one last time. I'm sorry, he said. And this time, there was no doubt in his voice, no hesitation, just truth. I didn't answer right away, because forgiveness wasn't something that came that easily, not after everything. But I also knew the story wasn't over. Not yet, because Lauren hadn't had her final moment, and something told me That moment was coming very soon. I didn't see Lauren again until the day everything finally broke open. It wasn't planned, it wasn't arranged, and it certainly wasn't calm. It happened a week later, right back where everything had started the bank. I had gone in that morning to finalize a few additional protections Mr. Reynolds had recommended. Nothing dramatic, just paperwork, signatures, the kind of quiet steps you take when you're putting your life back into your own hands. I was sitting in the same office reviewing documents when I heard raised voices out in the lobby. At first, I tried to ignore it. Banks aren't always quiet places. People argue, people get frustrated. But then I heard a voice I recognized, sharp, controlled, and now, cracking. Lauren, my hand stilled over the paper. Mr. Reynolds looked up from his desk, his expression shifting slightly. "Excuse me," he said, standing, but before he could reach the door, it swung open. Lauren stepped in. She looked different, not polished, not composed. Her hair was slightly out of place, her breathing uneven, her eyes sharper than I had ever seen them before. And behind her, Michael. He didn't try to stop her, didn't try to calm her. He just stood there, watching. Lauren's gaze landed on me instantly. "You," she said. Not my name, not a greeting, just accusation. Mr. Reynolds stepped forward. "Ma'am, you can't just... I need to speak with her." Lauren cut in her voice tight. "This isn't appropriate," he said firmly. But she didn't look at him. She only looked at me. "You think you're clever," she said. The words were quiet, but there was nothing soft about them. I set the pen down slowly. "I think I protected myself," I replied. Her lips tightened. "No," she said. "You interfered." A small, humorless breath escaped me. Interfered with what I asked. My own money. Michael shifted behind her. "Lauren, stop," he said. She ignored him. "You had no right to set those restrictions." She continued, her voice rising slightly. "You made everything more complicated than it needed to be. More complicated." "For you," I said calmly. Her eyes flashed. "For everyone," she snapped. "No," I replied. "Not everyone. Just you." The room fell silent. Mr. Reynolds didn't interrupt this time. He was watching, listening, just like the rest of us. Lauren took a step forward. "You don't understand how these things work," she said. "You're emotional. You're reactive. That's why people like you make mistakes. People like me." I felt something settle inside my chest, cold, steady. "I understand enough," I said. "I understand that you went into my house without permission. I understand that you took my documents, and I understand that you tried to use them." "That's not true," she said immediately, but her voice didn't carry the same certainty it once had. Michael stepped forward slightly. "Lauren," he said again, firmer now. "Just stop." She turned on him. "Stop what she demanded. Fixing the mess you created." His expression hardened. "I didn't create this," he said. "You did." The words hung in the air, and for the first time, Lauren faltered, just for a second, but it was enough. Her eyes searched his face as if trying to find something that wasn't there anymore. Loyalty, control, belief. But whatever she was looking for, it was gone. "You're really going to stand there and pretend you had nothing to do with this?" she asked. Michael shook his head slowly. "I trusted you," he said. "That's what I did." "And that's your mistake," she shot back. There was no apology in her voice, no regret, just irritation, like this entire situation was an inconvenience. Mr. Reynolds stepped in then. "Ma'am," he said firmly, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." She didn't move. Not yet. Instead, she looked at me one more time. Long. Carefully. As if trying to calculate something. "You think this is over," she said. I met her gaze. "I think it's been over for a while," I replied. Her jaw tightened. "You have no idea what you've set in motion." I tilted my head slightly. "No," I said. "I think I do." Another pause. Longer this time. Then finally, she stepped back, turned, and walked out of the room without another word. The silence she left behind felt different. Not tense, not heavy, just final. Michael didn't follow her. He stood there for a moment, staring at the door she had just walked through. Then slowly, he turned back to me. I didn't know he said again. His voice was quieter this time, more fragile. "I know," I replied. He swallowed hard. "I should have," he added. I didn't answer. Because that was the truth. He should have. Mr. Reynolds cleared his throat. "We'll be documenting this interaction," he said. "Given what's been said, it further supports the investigation." Michael nodded absently. But his attention wasn't on the investigation. It was on me. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he said. The words came easier now, but that didn't make them lighter. "I let her convince me that you might not be thinking clearly," he continued, "that you needed help, that I was protecting you. I listened, because this time, he was telling the truth. Even if it came too late, I wanted to believe I was doing the right thing," he said, "because the alternative," he trailed off, "because the alternative was this." I folded my hands in my lap, considering him carefully. "You weren't protecting me," I said. "You were handing me over." He flinched. The words hit, exactly where they needed to. "I know," he whispered. Silence settled between us again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one had honesty in it, pain, understanding, and something else, a question, one he hadn't asked yet, but I could see it in his eyes. Would I forgive him? I didn't answer. Not then, because forgiveness isn't something you give in a moment like this. It's something that has to be rebuilt, slowly, carefully, over time. But one thing was clear. The truth was out. Lauren's control was gone, and Michael was finally seeing everything for what it was. The damage had been done, but for the first time, there was a chance, a small one, that something real could be rebuilt from it. I stood up slowly, gathering my things. "I need some time," I said. He nodded immediately. "Of course." I walked past him without another word, out of the office, out of the bank, and into the quiet afternoon air. For the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not relief, not exactly, but something close. Because sometimes, the most powerful moment in a story isn't when everything falls apart. It's when the truth finally stands on its own and refuses to be ignored. The days after that confrontation were quiet. Not the kind of silence that feels empty, but the kind that follows a storm. When everything has already broken, already been said, already been exposed, and all that's left is the aftermath. I spent most of that time at home, not hiding, not retreating, just breathing, letting everything settle. The house still didn't feel quite the same as it used to. There were new locks on every door, cameras mounted in corners I had never thought I would need to watch, alerts that buzzed softly on my phone whenever something moved outside. It wasn't fear that kept those systems active. It was awareness. I understood now that safety wasn't something you assumed. It was something you maintained. Still slowly, the tension inside me began to ease, because the unknown, the part that had been eating at me for weeks, was gone. I knew what had happened. I knew who had been behind it, and most importantly, I had stopped it. The investigation moved forward quietly. Mr. Reynolds called twice to update me. The bank had escalated the case, and from what he shared, Lauren's actions were being formally reviewed, not just internally, but potentially beyond that. There were legal implications, serious ones. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them, because this wasn't about revenge. It never had been. It was about protection, and that part was already done. Michael called 3 days after the confrontation. I saw his name on the screen and let it ring longer than I usually would, not out of anger, but because I needed to decide something, whether I was ready to hear his voice again. Eventually, I answered. "Hello, Mom," he said. Just that, one word. But it carried more weight than anything else he could have said. We didn't speak right away. Neither of us rushed to fill the silence, because this time, the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was careful. "I've been trying to figure out what to say," he admitted after a moment. "That's a good place to start," I replied. He let out a small breath. "I don't think there's anything I can say that fixes this," he said. No, I agreed. There isn't. Another pause. But I want to try, he added. I sat down slowly in my chair, looking out the window at the quiet street. Then don't start with fixing it, I said. Start with understanding it. He was quiet for a moment. I thought I was helping you, he said. I know, I replied. But I see now. I wasn't really thinking for myself, he continued. I was listening to her, letting her explain everything, letting her decide what made sense. His voice tightened slightly. I didn't question it. I didn't question her. That's where it went wrong, I said. I know, he said again. There was no defensiveness in him anymore, no resistance, just acceptance. She made it sound like you were vulnerable, he went on, like you needed someone to step in before something bad happened. I closed my eyes briefly. And you believed that I said. I did, he admitted, because it was easier than asking why she was so interested in your money. The honesty in that sentence mattered more than anything else he had said so far. I let out a slow breath. That's a hard thing to admit, I said. It's the truth, he replied. We sat in that truth for a moment, then he spoke again. I've moved out, he said. I blinked. What I left, he said, the day after the bank. I packed a bag and went to stay with a friend. I didn't respond right away. Not because I didn't understand, but because I did. Completely. Are you all right? I asked. He let out a quiet, humorless breath. No, he said honestly. But I will be. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. That's something I said. I should have listened to you, he added. A long time ago. Yes, I said gently. You should have. But there was no anger in my voice. Not anymore. Because anger had already done its part. What was left now was something else. Something quieter. Something more complicated. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said. I'm not there yet, I replied. I understand, but that doesn't mean we can't talk, I added. There was a small pause. Then really? Yes, I said. It just means we take it one step at a time. I could hear the shift in his breathing. Relief. Not complete, but enough. Thank you, he said. I looked out the window again, watching as a car passed slowly down the street. This isn't going to be easy, I continued. Trust doesn't come back all at once. I know, he said. And I'm not going to pretend nothing happened, I added. You shouldn't, he agreed. Another pause. But this one felt different. Lighter. Like something had been opened just slightly. Not fixed, but possible. I'd like to see you, he said after a moment. Whenever you're ready. I considered that. Not quickly. Not emotionally. But carefully. Soon, I said, and for now. That was enough. After the call ended, I sat there for a long time, not thinking about Lauren, not thinking about the investigation, just sitting with the quiet. Because for the first time since all of this began, the chaos had settled, the danger had passed, and what remained was choice, the choice to rebuild or not, the choice to trust again or not, the choice to move forward on my terms, and that, more than anything else, was something no one could take from me again. Time has a strange way of softening things you once thought would never change, not erasing them, not excusing them, but reshaping them. In the weeks that followed, life didn't return to what it used to be. It became something else, something quieter, something more intentional. Michael and I started slowly, very slowly. The first time we saw each other again, it wasn't at my house. It wasn't at his. It was at a small cafe halfway between Cleveland and Columbus neutral ground. A place where neither of us had history, where we could sit across from each other, not as we were before, but as we were now, changed. We didn't hug right away. We didn't pretend everything was fine. We just sat down, ordered coffee, and looked at each other. Really looked. I've been thinking about that day, he said after a while. Which one, I asked. The bank, he replied. I nodded. It's hard not to. He gave a small, tired smile. I keep replaying it, he said, trying to figure out how I got there, how I didn't see what was happening. I took a slow sip of my coffee before answering. Sometimes we don't see things because we don't want to, I said. He nodded. That's exactly it, he admitted. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe I was doing the right thing. And now, I asked. He looked down at his hands. Now I know the difference between helping someone and controlling them, he said. There was no bitterness in his voice, just understanding, and that mattered. We talked for over an hour that day, not about everything, not yet, but about enough, about the small things, the real things, the things that had been buried under everything else. He told me he was looking for a new place to live, that he had started going through his finances himself for the first time in months, that he was learning. I should have been doing this all along, he said. Yes, I replied gently. You should have. But again, there was no anger, because this wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about growth, about whether he would take what had happened and become better because of it, or let it define him. As for Lauren, I never saw her again. Not in person, not by accident, but I heard enough. The investigation had moved forward. There were consequences, serious ones. And while I didn't follow every detail, I knew enough to understand that the story she had tried to write for me had ended very differently for her. Not because I fought her, but because I refused to be controlled by her. And that made all the difference. Back at home, things slowly began to feel like mine again, not just physically, but emotionally. The house was quiet, yes, but it was a peaceful kind of quiet, not the kind filled with doubt, not the kind that makes you question your own thoughts, just quiet, safe. I kept the cameras, the locks, the alerts, not out of fear, but out of respect for what I had learned, because trust isn't something you give blindly anymore. It's something you build carefully, protect deliberately, and never take for granted. One evening, a few weeks later, Michael came by. This time, I opened the door without hesitation. He stood there for a moment like he wasn't sure if he should step inside. You can come in, I said. He nodded and walked in slowly. The same house, the same rooms, but everything felt different. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where he used to do his homework, the same one where I used to fall asleep after long shifts. I remember this place, he said quietly. So do I replied. He looked around, taking it in. I forgot how much you gave up to keep all of this together, he said. I didn't answer right away, because that wasn't something I had done for recognition or gratitude. I had done it because I loved him. I didn't give it up, I said, finally. I chose it. He looked at me, and for the first time in a long time, he understood. I want to earn back your trust, he said. The words were simple, but they carried weight. I nodded slowly. Then start by being honest, I said, even when it's uncomfortable. I will, he promised, and don't expect it to happen quickly, I added. I won't. We sat there in the quiet for a moment. Not awkward, not strained, just real. And in that moment, I realized something. Healing doesn't come from forgetting what happened. It comes from facing it, understanding it, and choosing what to do with it. I didn't know exactly what our relationship would look like moving forward. I didn't know how long it would take, but I knew this. It was possible, and sometimes that's enough. Because in the end, this wasn't just a story about betrayal. It was a story about awareness, about strength, about knowing your worth, even when the people closest to you forget it. And most of all, it was a story about choosing yourself, even when it's hard, even when it hurts, even when it means standing alone. Because the moment you do that, everything changes, and no one can ever take that away from you again. There are moments in life when the people we trust the most become the ones who test us the hardest. Not always because they are cruel, sometimes because they are blind. Blind to influence. Blind to manipulation. Blind to the quiet ways control can disguise itself as care. What matters is not just what others do to us, but how we respond when it happens. I could have ignored the signs. I could have doubted myself. I could have handed over everything I worked for, just to keep the peace. But I didn't. And that choice changed everything. Because protecting yourself is not selfish. Setting boundaries is not cruel. And questioning what doesn't feel right is not a weakness. It's strength, real strength, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that doesn't need validation, the kind that stands quietly and refuses to be moved. And sometimes that strength comes at a cost. It can create distance. It can reveal truths you didn't want to see. It can even break relationships you thought were unbreakable. But it also does something else. It clears the path for something real, for honesty, for growth, for healing that isn't built on illusion. Michael and I are not the same as we were before, and we never will be. But what we have now is honest, and that matters more. So if you've ever been in a place where something didn't feel right, where someone tried to make you doubt yourself, where love started to feel like control, listen to that feeling. Trust it. Protect yourself. Because no one, no matter who they are, has the right to take your peace, your voice, or your worth away from you. And if you've ever faced something like this, I'd really like to hear your story. What would you have done in my place? Leave a comment, share your thoughts, and if this story meant something to you, don't forget to subscribe. You're not alone.